can be uplifting. That human connection that we create on the broadcast every night is incredibly important.
After nearly 4 decades of March Madness, this sports broadcasting legend is stepping away from his role in covering the NCAA basketball tournament. Jim Nantz on his fondest memories and what's next when we go person to person.
Imagine that. You leave criminals on the street, you get more crime.
It is shameful that the Republicans of this committee would use the pretext of violent crime as an excuse to play tourist in New York and bully the district attorney.
American debt is a ticking time bomb. Yet, how has President Biden reacted to this issue? He has done nothing.
We need leadership that brings out the best of America and doesn't appeal to our worst instincts.
I have never seen a case involving a public figure where the evidence of actual malice that they will have to put before a jury is stronger.
Welcome to Red and Blue. I'm Caitlin Huey-Burns in Washington. Thank you for joining us. Congress is back in session, and they have a lot on their agenda, including raising the debt ceiling. In a speech at the New York Stock Exchange today, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy pledged to raise it, but only if future federal spending is capped at 1%. The White House has called on McCarthy to approve the debt ceiling increase with no strings attached. The speaker criticized the president for not negotiating with him on funding, saying Biden's, quote, missing in action.
Well, good morning. Without exaggeration, American debt is a ticking time bomb that will detonate unless we take serious, responsible action. Yet, how has President Biden reacted to this issue? He has done nothing. So in my view, I think in the rest of America, that's irresponsible. Rather than face the facts, this president has embraced a fantasy that debt doesn't matter, that money can always be created out of thin air.
So for more on all of this, Nicole Killian and Anthony Salvanto join us now. Nicole is CBS News congressional correspondent on Capitol Hill, and Anthony is CBS News executive director of elections and surveys, joining us from New York. Anthony, I want to start with you because you have some new polling. I've been fascinated by how the public is assessing all of this, because these conversations are happening in Washington and New York today. But how is the public thinking about the debt ceiling? Is there wide support for raising it?
Hey there, Caitlin. The short answer is yes, there is, if it means the U.S. doesn't default. Let me walk you through that, which is if you just ask people, do you want to raise the debt ceiling? Do you want to have the government increase its borrowing? Majority of people says no. But if you follow that and you say, well, if not raising it means the U.S. will default, then people go, well, wait a second, and you get 70% of the public says, yeah, raise the debt ceiling in order to avoid default. And look, layering behind that is the fact that people already see a sort of uncertain economy. They don't think it's good. They don't necessarily think it's going to get better moving forward. So the implications of that are what really drives opinion. So yes, they want to raise the debt ceiling, Caitlin.
That's really interesting when you look at the nuances there, and I'm curious kind of how the parties will address that in their messaging. I'm also curious, you have some new polling out today on the Trump investigations, and we saw earlier today the House Judiciary Committee had a field hearing in New York on crime, but really trying to go after District Attorney Alvin Bragg against the latest Trump indictments. How's the public assessing these investigations into the former president?
Yeah, so we asked people broadly, okay, should Republicans in Congress try to do things that would stop the law enforcement's investigations into Donald Trump? And the answer to that, here we go again with partisan splits, but the answer to that is very different for Democrats and independents than it is for Republicans. By and large, the public says no, GOP Congress shouldn't get involved, should let the investigations run its course. But for about half, just over half of Republicans, that answer is yes. And that's partly because they see political motivations behind these investigations, not necessarily just going through the legal process the way others see it. Now, I would add this, Caitlin, because I think it's important for background here. We have seen in the polling an increase since January in the number of Republicans who say that it's very important and somewhat important, for the party to be loyal to Donald Trump. So that's up at 46, very important now, 30% somewhat important. And that total there, that 76% in that total, is up from, you see that shift, from what it was back in January. Of course, January was prior to him getting indicted. So you see that loyalty, that added importance for that. And I will add this final note, that is largely driven by Republicans who call themselves MAGA, who call themselves part of the MAGA movement. So they're still solidly with the former president, Caitlin.
Very interesting, Anthony, and especially now that Republicans have control of Congress and committees, they can use that to kind of demonstrate that support as well. Anthony Salvanto, as always, thank you very much. And we turn now over to Capitol Hill with Nicole Killian. And Nicole, I want to pick up on what Anthony was just talking about, which is kind of the way in which Republicans have coalesced around Donald Trump in light of these, in light of the indictment. We saw today, as I mentioned, the House Judiciary Committee having that hearing in New York, really to put pressure on Bragg. What kind of message were they hoping to send today?
Well, to your point, I mean, they're looking to keep the pressure on the Manhattan DA. I mean, a lot of this stems from a whole fight between the Judiciary Committee and the district attorney. They've been trying to get him in to sit down for a transcribed interview to get more information and insight as to why he made this decision to indict the former president. But for the most part, Bragg has turned his nose up to that, saying that Congress shouldn't interfere in an ongoing investigation and that they really are kind of stepping outside of their bounds. So there has been this tug of war between the two sides. And so this hearing today was really to try to, in Republicans' views, expose the district attorney and show that he is soft on crime and show why he needs to be held to account. So they had various crime victims who testified at this hearing. But Democrats had a counteroffensive planned and really said that, in their view, Republicans were simply trying to be the defense team for the former president, and that this was really just a political stunt in terms of holding this hearing in New York City earlier today.
And speaking of New York City, I mean, Jordan and his committee weren't the only ones taking a field trip up to New York. Kevin McCarthy, of course, was on Wall Street talking about the debt ceiling, saying that he wants to raise it, but with conditions, that cap on spending. I'm curious, though, because he hasn't really been able to answer whether he can get that through his own party. So I'm curious as to how it's being received on Capitol Hill among Republicans and among Democrats.
Well, I think ahead of the Speaker's speech, we did see various factions of the Republican conference put out proposals, many of which kind of touched on the broad outlines that the Speaker laid out today, whether that is lifting the debt ceiling for a year, whether that is capping future spending around 1% for the next 10 years, whether that is reclaiming unspent COVID funds or prohibiting the president's student loan forgiveness program. This is all, these are all proposals that we have heard from, for instance, the Main Street Republicans. The House Freedom Caucus has also put forth similar measures. And while they're not all exactly on the same page as of yet, the hope among Republican leadership is that they can, again, coalesce around something and perhaps try to get it through within the next month. Now, Democrats, for their part, have pushed back against the Speaker, including Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. And so I asked him, you know, what's next? What is the game plan here? Because it seems like both sides are kind of talking past each other. Take a listen. I'm not sure if we have that sound, but the bottom line is that, you know, in terms of the majority leader, he continues to say that Speaker McCarthy needs to present a plan. And Republicans would argue, well, this is our plan, or at least an opening salvo. And so the majority leader was really pushed on, for instance, if the Speaker is able to get the votes in order to pass Republicans' plan, if the Senate would take that up, if then serious conversations would ensue. And the Democratic leader continued to just say, well, we'll have to see if it gets through. We'll have to see if it gets the votes, you know, then maybe we'll consider it. So, again, at this point, still, we see kind of both parties in their respective corners with really not a whole lot of time left to try to settle their differences on the debt limit.
Yeah, Nicole, I mean, the clock is ticking here, and they seem nowhere close to any kind of agreement. So we'll keep an eye on that. Another item happening on Capitol Hill is what to do about Dianne Feinstein. Of course, she's the senior senator from California. She's been absent from the Senate for a little bit of time now, out with the shingles. But you're starting to see Democrats calling for her to leave the Judiciary Committee or be replaced on that committee because they want to get their judges through. How is Schumer and how are Democrats handling this? It seems to be kind of a delicate situation for them.
Well, right now, it's not so much how Democrats are handling it, but how Republicans are handling it. And we are now seeing a growing chorus from a number of Republicans as they return here to Capitol Hill saying that they are opposed to this idea of a temporary replacement. And keep in mind, it's actually Senator Feinstein who called for a temporary replacement, saying that she does hope to return to the Senate, that she has been recovering from shingles. And when her medical team clears her to travel back here to D.C., that she wants to come back. But it's been House Democrats in particular, a few notable ones like Ro Khanna, progressive out of California, who believe that she should just resign altogether. So that is the debate that's been generated here on Capitol Hill. But in the near term, in terms of this temporary replacement for Senator Feinstein, it's really going to come down to whether or not Democrats can get some buy-in from Republicans. And right now, at least out of the gate, it seems many of them are opposed. So this may not be very easy in terms of finding a replacement. And if that is the case, then, kind of the ball goes back to the senator's court in terms of how long she can really afford to stay out.
Yeah, really difficult to see what political incentives are there for Republicans to allow a replacement and then allow judges to get through for the Biden administration. But we will see how that plays out. Nicole Killian, a lot happening on Capitol Hill as Congress comes back into session. Thank you so much for your reporting.
You bet.
And meanwhile, the White House is fighting back against House Speaker Kevin McCarthy's remarks on the debt limit in New York today. In a statement, the White House said in part, quote, "There is no responsible solution to the debt limit. Addressing it promptly, without brinksmanship or hostage taking, as Republicans did 3 times in the last administration." They're saying that's the only way. Joining us now is CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang. Thank you so much, Weijia, for being here. We appreciate it. So as Nicole kind of outlined for us, there is a lot of back and forth on Capitol Hill, but the White House seems pretty firm about not engaging in any sort of negotiation. Have they led on to how long they can kind of hold that position?
Well, from day one, the White House's position has been just that. And there are no indications that the president plans to give any wiggle room here, because they have said since this conversation began that the president will not negotiate when it comes to anything regarding the debt limit. He says that he is open to negotiating when he's talking about a broader budget, but that has to be decoupled from the conversation about the debt ceiling. And now we are seeing the White House using Republicans' very own voting record against them, pointing to what Donald Trump himself said in a new statement from the White House, saying that Trump back in 2019 said, "I can't imagine anybody ever even thinking of using the debt ceiling as a negotiating wedge." And, the Biden administration saying that Kevin McCarthy is trying to do exactly that and that they will not stand for it. And so I don't anticipate any movement on that. And right now, I think something else that they've done from day one is really trying to make sure the public understands, in their view, that it is Republicans that are holding the economy hostage, to use the words from the White House, and that if for some reason nothing is compromised and that the U.S. defaults on its loans, they are going to clearly lay all the blame on the Republicans. But of course, Republicans will have plenty to say themselves in blaming the White House for not coming to the table at all.
Yeah, and that's why the polling that we have from CBS News is so interesting today, because when you ask about raising the debt limit, then you ask about raising it to avoid default. Americans very much don't want to see that happen. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about the latest battle over abortion medication, because we saw last week the Supreme Court kind of gave people a little bit more breathing room. They're supposed to weigh in officially by Wednesday. This has been such a hot button issue, of course, and I'm curious kind of how the White House is seeing this, as abortion obviously is such a key motivator for Democratic voters, but at the same time, this is something that the court is addressing. Has Biden weighed in? Are they kind of just waiting to see what the court does? What's their strategy here?
Well, they don't really have an option here, and they've said as much. They have to allow this to play out in court, because even though some more left-leaning members of the party, most notably Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, excuse me there, I had a brain pause for a moment. She says that the Biden administration should simply ignore the ruling. And the White House says they will not do that, because that sets a dangerous precedent, too. So as dangerous as it is to allow this ruling to go into effect, if it does, officials here saying that, they can't not abide by it. So they have to allow the legal process to play out, which is exactly why the Justice Department filed an emergency appeal right away. And I want to be really clear about what the Supreme Court's decision means for now. As you mentioned, it was conservative Justice Alito who put a temporary stay on this, which means they're just buying themselves more time, putting a hold on that Texas ruling that, bans the abortion pill until they have more time, until they can come to an actual decision. So to be clear, that does not mean that they are restricting that ruling altogether on the substance. It means that they are still considering it. And we do expect them to make some sort of a decision, because that stay, that emergency procedure, expires Wednesday at midnight. Caitlin?
Yeah, it seems like a difficult position for the White House, because this is something that politically is very, something that they would want to weigh in on, but are just kind of hamstrung in terms of what they can do. Weijia Jiang, thank you so much. I know you are fresh back from covering the president in Ireland and back on another green lawn behind you. Not as green as I'm sure it was over there, but glad to have you back stateside. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we've got our first official look at fundraising numbers for 2024 candidates. When we come back, we'll look at who exaggerated what they raised. You're streaming Red and Blue, reporting across the political divide.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
The first U2 show really was on this outside here.
Oh, right there.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Nora O'Donnell, and we go person to person with Bono.
Community is at the very heart of U2's music. There was magic, that's all we had.
Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
If it's important to our nation.
Madam Speaker, I want to talk to you, of course, about abortion.
It's on Face the Nation.
How much money is it that you think you need to go ask Congress for?
The why behind the biggest stories.
Can there be stability if Vladimir Putin remains in power?
Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan on CBS.
An original documentary from CBS reports. As the nation of Hungary evolves toward autocracy,
If you define an autocrat as someone that the people can no longer get rid of, even when there are elections, he's definitely an autocrat.
some American conservatives like what they see.
Viktor Orban has done a tremendous job, and you've kept your country safe.
CBS Reports explores their growing alliance.
I have come to Texas. We should unite our forces.
So there are a ton of booths here, a lot of young people here.
And what it means for American democracy.
Prime Minister Orban is being accused of all kinds of things simply because he doesn't toe that liberal line. He stands for Christian conservative values.
To sum up, the mother is a woman, the father is a man, and leave our kids alone. Full stop, end of discussion.
A new conservative alliance, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
when weather turns extreme.
The threat of severe weather and dangerous tornadoes is expected to last.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
Let's bring in our partners at the Weather Channel.
Now 6 feet of water, imagine that. Cars that can act like battery lamps.
These hyper-realistic simulations show you what the weather will look and feel like before it happens.
Feel the forecast, streaming on CBS News.
We're really excited that we've been honored with the Emmy Award for Outstanding Live News Program. But we know we couldn't have done that without you. So thank you. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7 on CBS.
The news doesn't have to always be depressing.
What do you love about running?
It can be uplifting. That human connection that we create on the broadcast every night is incredibly important.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. We're learning more about fundraising numbers for 2024 candidates. Never too early. CBS News reporter Sarah Ewald-Weiss joins us now. Okay, so we got these new FEC filings, and this always gives us a good indication of where these campaigns are going. And I know it's very early, but we got a lot of information from some of these. And I really kind of want to start with Nikki Haley, because she made huge headlines for raising $11 million in that first quarter, which surprised a lot of people. But you have been digging into the numbers, and you found that it's not exactly how it appears. What happened there?
No. So her campaign put out an announcement that they'd raised $11 million since she launched, which is a great number, especially for a candidate who has been polling in the single digits, low single digits at that. So it was a really good sign. But then we got the FEC filings over the weekend, and it looks like they had doubled up some numbers. So essentially, she has a presidential campaign committee that takes in cash. She also has a joint fundraising committee that takes in cash. And then she has a leadership committee. All these different entities taking in cash. The thing is they actually also are transferring money between each other. So there was some overlapping numbers where they were double counting certain transfers into that presidential campaign committee, which made it look like a lot larger a number than it was. What she really did raise was about $8.3 million, which is still a really good number, exactly, for a candidate who's been polling where she is. And, you know, she has about $7.8 million cash on hand. So that is a strong number moving forward. Essentially, they just cooked the books a little bit in this first announcement, but still good fundraising.
And that's why we're glad that you dig into the numbers for us to kind of find all those nuances. But I mean, I think that's the challenge, right, for these candidates, as you mentioned, is trying to compete in this donor space when you have Donald Trump, who has been trying to raise money off this indictment. Has he been successful? What do his numbers look like?
It is interesting because the fundraising FEC filings we have are from January through March. He was indicted in early April. With that said, though, what we know from the FEC filings specifically is his presidential campaign took in $14.4 million in the first quarter of the year. For someone of his stature, that's really not as much as maybe you would perhaps expect, and well below what he'd been fundraising when he was the president. As a former president, not as strong. With that said, though, his campaign did announce that in the 24 hours after his indictment, he raised $4 million. Since then, it's gotten even higher. And so when you add all the numbers together, it's a lot larger a sum. They really had a lot of the fundraising come in around that indictment in early April, but that's not reflected in these figures right now. What we know is he has $13.9 million cash on hand, according to the FEC filings at the end of March, but that could be more than 10 million greater because of the indictment fundraising that he did and all those fundraising emails that all of our inboxes were swarmed with.
Yes, I was going to say we've both gotten a lot of those. I mean, I'm fascinating to kind of see where the money goes here, and that will give us an indication of how people are feeling about this field of candidates and whether there are some vulnerabilities for Donald Trump. Obviously, the presidential race will consume much of 2024, but we've got some Senate candidates. I know you've been looking into that Arizona race, which everybody's going to be following. Ruben Gallego seemed to have a successful first quarter.
Yes, this is really interesting to me because it's a battleground race for the general election, but there's also this basically in-party fighting right now because Senator Sinema became an independent. And so now she's being challenged from the left. And her challenger, he raised $3.7 million in this quarter. That's more than what she raised, which was $2.1 million. And his campaign sent out a memo, and it says that 99% of his donations were small dollar donations, less than $200, versus Senator Sinema's donations were about 1%, less than 1% of them were small dollar donations.
So that shows some grassroots support for his candidacy.
Exactly. Yeah. Grassroots support right now and a long way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. That will be a fascinating race to watch if those two go against each other. Sarah, good to see you. Thank you so much. A lot more to come this cycle, I know. And coming up, Dominion's defamation lawsuit against Fox News has been delayed. Next, what we know about possible negotiations happening in private. You're streaming Red and Blue.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
The first U2 show really was on this outside here.
Oh, right there.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Nora O'Donnell, and we go person to person with Bono.
Community is at the very heart of U2's music. There was magic, that's all we had.
Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
If it's important to our nation.
Madam Speaker, I want to talk to you, of course, about abortion.
It's on Face the Nation.
How much money is it that you think you need to go ask Congress for?
The why behind the biggest stories.
Can there be stability if Vladimir Putin remains in power?
Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan on CBS.
An original documentary from CBS reports. As the nation of Hungary evolves toward autocracy,
If you define an autocrat as someone that the people can no longer get rid of, even when there are elections, he's definitely an autocrat.
some American conservatives like what they see.
Viktor Orban has done a tremendous job, and you've kept your country safe.
CBS Reports explores their growing alliance.
I have come to Texas. We should unite our forces.
So there are a ton of booths here, a lot of young people here.
And what it means for American democracy.
Prime Minister Orban is being accused of all kinds of things simply because he doesn't toe that liberal line. He stands for Christian conservative values.
To sum up, the mother is a woman, the father is a man, and leave our kids alone. Full stop, end of discussion.
A new conservative alliance, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When weather turns extreme,
The threat of severe weather and dangerous tornadoes is expected to last.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
Let's bring in our partners at the Weather Channel.
Now 6 feet of water, imagine that. Cars that can act like battering rams.
These hyper-realistic simulations show you what the weather will look and feel like before it happens.
Feel the forecast, streaming on CBS News.
We're really excited that we've been honored with the Emmy Award for Outstanding Live News Program. But we know we couldn't have done that without you. So thank you. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7 on CBS.
The news doesn't have to always be depressing.
What do you love about running?
It can be uplifting. That human connection that we create on the broadcast every night is incredibly important.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. The trial of Dominion Voting Systems' $1.6 billion defamation lawsuit against Fox News that was supposed to happen today is delayed until Tuesday morning. Dominion is suing the network, saying Fox knowingly spread false claims that the company's voting machines were rigged during the 2020 election. Judge Eric Davis's delay of the start of the trial also includes the finalizing of jury selection. So joining us now from outside the Wilmington, Delaware courthouse is our CBS News congressional correspondent, Scott McFarland, who has been covering all of this trial that is going to begin tomorrow. So, Scott, the courthouse is closing for the day. What do we know about what's been happening kind of behind the scenes during this delay?
The judge gave everybody 24 hours to begin this trial, which cracked the door open, Caitlin, for a possible settlement. But any indication or signs of a possible settlement are undetectable at this point. That crack is getting narrower and narrower. The final steps of jury selection begin here tomorrow morning at the courthouse, then opening arguments by midday. The window is getting smaller and smaller, but both sides acknowledge a settlement is still possible, Caitlin. During the trial itself, both sides have leverage. Both sides say publicly that they're ready for trial.
And Scott, cameras won't be allowed in the courtroom, right? So how will this look from the outside?
For those worried this will be a spectacle, keep in mind this is a spectacle that will be largely invisible. No cameras in the courtroom, no electronic devices that can communicate out in the courtroom either. So when the superstar witnesses take the stand, possibly Rupert Murdoch, Sean Hannity, Tucker Carlson, they won't be doing so to a mass audience. It may just be people who are already dialed into this issue and already have opinions on this issue. That's part of the leverage Fox brings to a possible trial starting tomorrow.
Well, if we learned anything from the Trump indictment, even if there's no camera, we know that you, Scott McFarland, will be our eagle eyes in the courtroom, ready to report it all. Thank you so much. And a quick programming note, tune in tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern to CBS News Prime Time with John Dickerson. John will have on Jeremy Burke, who is a friend of detained Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich. They will discuss Evan as a person and as a journalist and what Evan's imprisonment means for journalism as a whole. So tune into that. And that does it for us today. You can stream Red and Blue Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. You're streaming CBS News.
In today's Money Watch, business analyst Jill Schlesinger is here to help.
How do you even begin to make the best use of your money? If you've got a match from your employer, don't give away that money.
Dollar Jill, y'all.
CBS Mornings, starting at 7.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
The carnage